All right, so here is the diesel heater. I went with this Vivor brand, which seems to be one of the few that's actually branded of these Chinese diesel heaters. I got it for under 100 US. So I guess this will be a little bit of an unboxing. So it comes with a 10-liter tank that has these nice little mounting areas. That's what these holes are for. Um, the hardware is on the inside, so don't forget about that before you put fuel inside. Next is the actual heater itself in this little foam situation. I don't know why they're so colorful, but here it is. So the air intake, the hot air out, and then power. And then this little box has all the rest of the stuff for hooking it up. So actually this is nice. There's the exhaust pipe, insulation for the exhaust pipe. I believe this is air intake. This is the Chinese stuff, so the quality is really poor. I believe this is part of the air intake. This looks like the fuel line. I'd already taken it out because I was doing some fiddling, but I believe this is the hot air kind of ducting, and it has a couple of options for how you route this. So I'm probably just going to use this one and kind of blow it down the hallway. But it looks like you have this ability to do a 90-degree turn, and then you'd have to, I guess, buy more ducting and vents to make that work. Got a bunch of mounting hardware, zip ties. Looks like the fuel filter. That's nice. Fuel pump. The crummy muffler that I'm not sure actually does anything. Bunch of wiring. And the controller, as well as a remote, which is kind of nice. Mounting plate that goes on the bottom of the heater. I believe this is kind of like a heat shield, essentially, if it's getting mounted on wood. And the instructions, which I've already flipped through, they are amazingly badly translated. So I don't know how useful those are going to be. So that's everything that came in the box. And in addition to what came in the kit itself, what you're looking at here on the table in the trailer is the extra stuff that I went out and bought for this installation. So let me talk you through these. Because I'm in a trailer that is going to be stationary, it's never going to be a towed. It's always going to have AC power. So I am going to wire this up to this AC/DC transformer, like the kind of brick you would have for your laptop. This one is designed for, like having a car lighter 12-volt thing inside your house. So I'm just going to cut this on the end and then wire this up to the power source. And there's actually an outlet right near where the heater is going to go. If you want to do this kind of a solution, it's really important that it be able to deliver 20 amps. So this is 12 volts. And it can do 250 watts, right? So if you divide 250 by 12, you get a little more than the 20 amps required. It doesn't run on 20 amps all the time, but it does need to be able to draw that for the glow plug startup. And then I've just got these butt joint heat shrink things to facilitate connecting this to the existing wiring. So that's how I'm going to power the thing. If you have a 12-volt system already or a battery, you don't need any of that. I also got this 4-inch vent that is just to allow air into where the heater is going to be. So the heater is going to be in this bench around the kind of dinette system. I'm sure that it can suck, like it's not exactly airtight when the wood panel is just on top. But I'm just going to put a vent in the side to ensure that there's sufficient airflow, not for the combustion chamber, but just so that it's drawing air from inside the trailer that it can be heating and then spitting out the other side. I don't know how important that is, but airflow is usually a good idea with these kinds of things. You're going to want some way to seal the mounting plate. So what I've got is this high temperature gasket from an automotive shop. This is like a silicone kind of gasket maker thing. It's good for up to like 340 Celsius or 650 Fahrenheit, which is way hotter than this thing is ever going to get on the outside. Some of the videos I've seen where they measure the temperature of the exhaust right at the point that it's coming out, it's like 150 Celsius or something like that. So this is definitely overkill. I have no idea how well this is going to work. I would definitely love some feedback about this. Not shown on the table, of course, is that I'm going to have a carbon monoxide detector. So if this isn't working, I'm going to know pretty quick because of the carbon monoxide detector. So you definitely want that fail-safe to go with this. But I was thinking that this kind of sort of self-gasket making thing is probably going to be the best way to potentially remove this if necessary, but to also fill in the wood grain. So that's how I'm going to seal it. For the air intake that's going to be outside the car, I bought this sort of aftermarket air filter. Now, here's what it came with. It calls this sort of a silencer. I'm a little bit worried that this would allow really small insects in through those holes. I'm also a little bit worried that this is going to restrict airflow, and I really don't think that's a good idea to have restricted airflow in the combustion chamber. And I did see a few videos where people actually tested. Sometimes these are also called silencers. These actually make the air intake louder because you're causing so much turbulence. And that extra noise makes me think this is also restricting airflow to the combustion chamber. So I'm going to throw this away, this thing that came with it. And I'm going to replace it with this air filter that's going to hopefully keep mice and other things out of it, but also allow a lot more free flow of air into the combustion chamber. Lastly, I am upgrading the fuel line that goes from the pump to the burner. So let me show you what comes with the kit. I don't know what this material is. It's very soft and flexible. And the bigger problem that based on some videos I saw by a guy named John McKay, which I will link to his videos down in the description. They are the most informative and detailed videos I have ever seen on these Chinese diesel heaters. It's like a 20-part series. And anybody who ever wants to install one of these needs to go watch every single minute of every single one of those videos. So what he said, and this is not me, he's very much shown himself to be an expert in my opinion. So what he says is these kinds of are okay on the kind of fuel tank to pump end of things. But on the pump to delivery end of things, this has two problems. First, because it's flexible, it's a bit cold out here, so it's not as flexible. Because this is flexible and because the pumps are like piston pumps, some of that kind of piston pumping force is actually lost to flexing this cable, which means you're losing some of your pump's ability to deliver fuel to the combustion chamber. And I think this is probably why some of these Chinese heaters sit up and break really early. The other problem that John identifies that makes a lot of sense from an engineering perspective to me is that the wide diameter makes it really difficult for fuel to actually be adequately delivered to the combustion chamber. He actually does a demonstration where he shows what it looks like for fuel kind of dribbling out the end of this kind of tube that comes with it, versus what he suggests is a hard nylon 2mm diameter fuel line. And when he uses this, it is squirting out like 20, 30 millimeters away from the ejection point instead of just dribbling down the side. This is going to give you a much better kind of fuel injection. It's not true injection, but it's going to give you better fuel delivery. And given how he just seems to be so incredibly knowledgeable of these things, I am taking his advice and I'm using this for the fuel line between the pump and the burner itself. And I'll use what came with it to go from the tank to the pump itself. And let me grab the pump and I'll show you, I think, why this is important. So here is the pump and here is the 2mm fuel line. I think you can probably see that the opening on this is on the pump is about 2mm, and that this 2mm inner diameter tube is about the same. So the advantage of this is that because this only spits out 0.2 of a millimeter every time the piston goes up and down, um, this will be much more able to push the material through because it's not flexible, but also because the diameter matches. It's also going to be much more able to push out the bubbles that are naturally formed by cavitation just because of the piston style pump. The downside to this, and then I'm following John McKay's recommendation, the downside to this is you can't like put this over the fuel pump because it's the exact same diameter. So what is going to happen instead is that's why I have the second fuel line that I bought that has an inner diameter. I'll have links to these. I don't remember the numbers, but the inner diameter of this is the same as this, and the outer diameter of this is the same as this. So I think it'll become clearer when I do the installation. But the idea then is that I'm going to have a little bit of this on this, and then I'm going to use this to go over the pump, if that makes sense. Kind of like a butt joint for these two things. So then overall, this will have the two sheaths around it, and it'll be pressed up tight against the end of that. And finally, you can either invest in a sort of turret style mount where the mounting plate has a circle down below to help get the exhaust kind of through the hole, or in my case, I just bought a 4-inch duct from the hardware store and cut it to have these little dog ears. This was like $5. And this just gives me a little bit more thermal protection since I'm mounting this into plywood. So it's going to protect the inner part of the plywood. And I'm probably going to say this a few times in this video. The flash point of wood, the point at which pure temperature alone sets it on fire, is between 400 and 600 Celsius. The exhaust is not that hot. It's around 150 to 200 Celsius, nowhere near the flash point. So I am adding protection, and I do not think this is going to catch fire. It's just not, the physics and the thermodynamics of it are on my side. All right. To install a diesel heater, at least the way I did, these are the tools you're going to need. So drill is useful, an impact driver is useful. You'll need a 4-inch hole saw is what I needed to drill the hole in the floor for the mounting plate to go on top of, and a 3-inch hole saw for the duct. You'll need some other you'll potentially need some other just various drill bits to do things for cables. You'll need various bits and a screwdriver to probably do things by hand or with the impact driver. These types of things are really useful for closing up those ratchet strap things with the screws on them. You'll see when I get to it. I installed a piece of ducting through the floor and then used this to kind of cut it. You'll see how that works. So this is a pair of like tin snips. Pliers are always handy, and then you'll need some kind of utility knife, hopefully a better one than this. But to cut the fuel line, you don't want to clamp, like cut the fuel line, or you'll potentially like misshape it. So you definitely want to use a sharp knife to cut it cleanly without compressing it into like a flat shape. And that's kind of it. You don't actually need a lot of tools for this. You could probably get away with a jigsaw if you're better than I am with it instead of these hole saws, but the hole saws will make your job cleaner and better. And when we're dealing with exhaust and things like that, I do think it's worth investing in the hole saw, at least for this part of going through your floor. So what I've done is I traced the mounting plate just so I knew kind of where it belonged, and then I pulled the little silicone gasket off. So I pulled the silicone gasket off the bottom and traced it trace the mounting plate and all the holes first, and then lined up this round silicone gasket with the holes and cut that too. When I got underneath, so I drilled far enough that the center hole came out. Turned out that there actually was room to come quite a bit closer. And so the reason I did this was just to have this kind of as far forward as possible so that if I ever wanted to put a water tank back in here, there'd be ample room at the back of this. All right, so I applied a circular bead around the hole for this vent, and I sort of trimmed it because the plate is rectangular. Flattening all those folds. Okay, and then Here's what I did. I applied, 2 beads kind of around the perimeter, but on the inside of the screws and around the circle as well. And then this should all kind of ooze out. All right, and here's what it looks like. I got a good squeeze out all the way around, which makes me think this is going to be a nice seal. Always have a carbon monoxide detector with this, always. And so that will, give you an indication of any problems you might have that will kill you. So this needs to set up for like 24 hours, and I'm just going to let it be, and then we can move on to the next part of the install. I've been sort of wondering what this is about, and I'm actually wondering if this is a place where I could run the wire for the fuel pump down to, rather than drilling a second hole for it. If anybody knows, I would love to hear about that in the comments, right? So this is going to be as far as possible from the hot exhaust line. So it seems to me that that would be safe. The only reason I think it could not be ideal is that it might not be sealed very well with a wire running below it. So the next thing to do, I think, is to get the heater itself mounted on this plate. I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera. All right, and I'm not really going to be able to film this because there's so much snow and I'm going to have to get under the trailer. So here is the air intake. So I've got the extra filter that I bought just attached with one of these hose clamp things. And then obviously on the other side, it will be attached. I've got the exhaust with the muffler attached, and you want this little hole where it drips to be facing down so that water can drip out. So it's attached with a clamp thing. And then this kit actually came with this sort of heat protecting stuff and a couple of hose clamps. So it's attached like this, and then this is what will attach to the bottom of the thing. And then obviously I'm going to have, as best I can, an angle on this so that like you don't want a lot of turns in this, and you want it to always be facing down so that any water or anything that's in there can drip out. All right, here's what it looks like underneath. You can see my little duct that came down. You can see the air intake and exhaust here. I did decide to use this little cutout by the air intake to run the fuel line wire down. I would love it if anyone has any insight as to why that's there and how bad of an idea this is. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tin snips and cut this, and so I can fold it up against and create a bit of a heat shield on this side of things. All right, and then here's what I've done with the fuel pump. It comes with this kind of rubber soft mount because these things do create some vibration. I'm hoping that because this is on the outside and it's going to be the opposite side of where the bed is, that it's not too bad. But we shall see. I've mounted it on this 2x4 because there wasn't anything under there. Like this needs to be mounted vertically, and there wasn't anything to attach it to. So I'm going to recycle some of the strapping, 1970 strapping that was holding the old water tank on, and get this mounted vertically underneath. I want to talk about what's going on with the 3 types of fuel line that I'm using. So this is my 2mm inner diameter hard nylon fuel line. It matches the inner diameter of both your pump and all of the intake and other stuff that delivers to the burn chamber. Again, this is not my expertise. This is John McKay's videos that I've linked down in the description. So what he suggests and what I'm doing is basically using these multiple pieces. So the black line that I bought is a fuel line that has an inner diameter that's the same as the outer diameter of this main fuel line. And so what you do is you just feed it over, and you want this to line up exactly. You don't want any spot where air bubbles can form on the inside, right? So ultimately we want this tight up against here with no air bubbles in between that are going to impede the motion of fuel, because these fuel lines these piston pumps create cavitation and air bubbles. So you need 2 of these ones, and then this is what we're going to use to fit it over top of this. So I've done the same thing I talked about. So I've got this, the fuel line that it came with as like a little coupler, this slightly wider one, and then I've already installed the fuel line to the bottom of the heater, and then hopefully I can slide that in and we'll be all good. Okay, as promised, it is not easy to film underneath of here laying on my back. here's what I did. I cut this, folded it down, got the exhaust attached. It is not easy to work in here, so do your best. I've got the air intake and the fuel line coming over a very short run to the fuel pump. When the power is now connected, I haven't attached the fuel tank yet. That's basically the last thing to do. Use the strapping to attach the 2x4. Before anyone makes any comments, I want to remind you that this trailer is never leaving this property ever again. So this is probably not what you would do for something that's going to be on the highway, right? These are going to catch in the wind. The trailer would be moving in this direction on the highway. So this funny thing back here is not great. I don't know how smart this 2x4 hanging down here would be, right? If I was making this highway safe, I'd probably attach to these struts or something. But again, this trailer is never going to move again. I mean, it might move around the property, but it's not going on the highway. So what I'm showing you here is probably not highway safe, but it's going to work for what I'm doing here. The air intake kind of goes backwards towards the back of the trailer, and it's just zip tied over here with the filter. The exhaust comes to the front, which again, I think would be bad if this was going to be on the highway, but it's not going to be. Okay, so for the fuel tank, the hardware is usually inside. And there's these kind of thickened spots where you can drill a hole. You have to drill your own hole. There's one on either side. I've seen people put the holes kind of wherever. I have no idea how good of an idea that is. What you have to do is this little kind of thing has to be on the inside pointing out. And so this struck me as really hard until I read the instructions, as ever. So I've just got a coat hanger through the opening and out the hole, and then you can just slide this down on through. So that's good. For my kit, and I'm sure this is going to be different, so, get a pair of calipers and read the instructions. My instructions told me to use a 7.5 millimeter drill bit because everywhere except the USA uses the metric system. 9/32 is as close as you can get, I think, in Imperial, and that got me pretty close. And then I just did the thing, where you kind of wiggle the drill to just open it up by like 1/10 of a millimeter. So yeah, I used a 9/32 bit, and that worked just fine. So yeah, this is going to go down on the inside. Make sure you use one of these rubber gaskets. That's going to be on the outside, and then again, make sure you use one of the rubber gaskets. And then it also came with these screws that you can use to mount this on a wall or a piece of wood. Okay, so here is the fuel line connector. Like I said, just fish through with the coat hanger and then screwed on. Make sure you get the O-rings on both sides. You don't need a gas link. And then, yeah, this is the hose that came with it. I just squeeze it over, and then these are the clamps that came with it. The next thing is to install the filter that came with it. If you don't know, it sort of has this container on the outside with a mesh screen on the inside. That's the filter part, right? So you want it mounted this way so that any debris that might be in here is in this little thing, and you can unscrew it and get it out, right? So the fuel filter goes on this way. I think you want this pretty close to the tank, but I'm not going to put this on until I get outside and have a sense of how all of this is going to go together. All right, and for the fuel tank, so here's the front of the trailer where the propane would have been. There was this little broken plastic 1970s thing that I think had something to do with the propane, but it already had 4 screws into the frame. I'm not very interested in making new holes, but I've got a sheet of plywood that you'll see in a second on the back of the fuel tank, and I'm going to try to use these existing holes to mount the fuel tank. All right, and here's what it looks like screwed onto those existing holes. So I haven't added any new holes to the shell of this. So yeah, pretty happy with this. And actually that piece of plywood was the shelf I removed from under the sink, if you've seen my other video where I worked on the sink of this. So a little bit of recycling there. So I just want to say again, if it wasn't clear already, this is not road safe, but this thing is never going on the road again. So I'm happy with locating this at this location. All right, I just want to show you this. I mean, I think it's self-explanatory, but like I said, so here is the 12 volt, 250 watt brick that plugs into AC power. It had one of these 12 volt car plugs on it, which I just cut off and stripped the wires. Here is the wire harness that comes with the diesel heater itself, and it's designed to go onto a battery. which I think is the normal thing most of you would do. Cut those leads off, joined them with some butt joints that had heat shrink built in, and then just shrank it down. So this is now pretty well sealed up. And, I did a quick test and plugged it in, and it seemed to power up. Obviously, I don't have the thing set up. But the controller came on, and it didn't throw any codes. This one I got does have a fuse built in. So hopefully if this does anything wonky, it will blow this fuse rather than all the electronics inside of this. Okay, so here's the vent for the hot air that's going to heat the trailer. And one of the problems I think with these is it would be nice if the controller wire actually plugged in and out of this thing. And I don't know, maybe it does if you take it apart. But because it's got this massive thing on the end, you'd either have to cut it or drill a gigantic hole to get this in anywhere. I think this is a real design flaw in these things. But anyway, what I've done is here is the outlet hole where this vent is going to go. And I drilled a 1/4-inch hole just, put this in, a 1/4-inch hole just to the edge of this, where basically trying to conceal this as best I can. And then I just took a handsaw and cut up to the to the hole. There we go. So now I can feed the wire up to the hole. I can put the vent on, and it's relatively clean. So I'm gonna have this, the wire's so short, I'm just gonna have this attached to the bench. It does have a remote, so I'm hoping that this will be okay. And then because this is in one of the seat benches, again, it's probably not necessary, but I do think that having good airflow is just going to be good. So I've got a 4-inch hole cut here. Honestly, I didn't realize that I didn't realize this was 3 inches, so 3 inches would have probably been fine. But I ordered a 4-inch vent that's just going to get installed there, and all that's going to do is allow for airflow into the seat cabinet thing. Just I don't want any chance that the airflow into this cabinet is restricted, thereby potentially causing overheating or anything like that. Okay, it is fully installed. Hopefully you can see this. The next thing we need to do is prime the pump. But I figured out that with this type of controller, it seems that holding these two down, I don't know if you could hear that, but holding those two down primes the pump. It looks like it goes for 3 or 4 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds if you just press it, or you can hold it to prime while you're holding it. And when you let go, it goes for 3 to 5 seconds longer. I haven't actually timed it. So what you need to do on the first operation is get the fuel basically right up to the bottom of the heater, but you don't want to flood the chamber or it's not going to start. So anyway, that's how you operate the priming thing, which I think not that many videos actually showed in the installation process. They just said, oh, make sure you prime the pump. So hopefully this helps anyone. Controllers are different, so this is not the only type of controller. So definitely poke around on the internet, definitely check your instruction manual. But for this type of controller, that seems to be the way to do it. So because my fuel line and everything is entirely outside, I'm gonna have to kind of go in and out and make sure I don't flood the chamber, and I'm gonna do that off screen. All right, I think it's primed. To change the units, so I've switched to Celsius, you hold down the power button and the up button on this one for a couple of minutes. To set the clock, you can hold the OK button and then use the up and down buttons. Somewhat counterintuitively, you sort of switch digits with the power button. To turn it on, you hold the power button for a couple of seconds. Makes a little click, and then this little H3 tells you that it's on 3 pulses per second. So what it's going to do to start, I don't know if you can see, there's little arrows telling you that there's air intake and exhaust going, and then the little glow plug light comes on. So because this is diesel, this glow plug is going to warm up for I've never timed it, but it's a fair long while. So if you've never used one of these before and you power it up, the fan comes on for a second, and if you're thinking, oh my God, what's going on? Give it a minute or 5 for the glow plug to warm up. But that's what that little icon there is indicating. All right, and then there's the pump that just kicked on. So it does a bit of a warm-up cycle. So it's going to basically run at what sounds like top speed to me again for a minute or so until I think it's warmed up and the combustion is all working, and then it will settle into however you have set it. So this one, and they seem to all be different. I believe this is the hertz, although I do not think that this is actually the hertz. So it has like 6 levels. So H1 is your lowest setting, and then yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6. At 6, this thing will be just blasting out heat. So what I tend to do with mine is it sort of defaults to 3 when you turn it on. Sometimes I'll let it run like that for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll lower it down to the lowest setting. Yeah, so I mainly control mine by adjusting the pump hertz. One thing to know about these, and I haven't tested this, but I've seen it in other videos, is that the lowest setting will actually produce the most carbon monoxide. So that is something to maybe consider when you're running these things. The other way to control these, so if you press, if you hold the little, star-shaped thing, you can now set it into like temperature mode, and you can do this. The problem with this, with these default heaters, is the way this works is that if the temperature drops below its set point, it goes on to full blast, so the 6 setting on the hertz. And then when it reaches that, it goes down to 1 hertz. It never turns off. And the reason it doesn't turn off is because this thing draws a lot of power to warm up the glow plug. And so it's an intentional design feature of these to not turn off and turn on all the time, because that would really rapidly drain your batteries. So I don't use the temperature set. Like I said, I use the hertz setting. Yeah, and that's kind of it. I mean, the icon here is for the pump. You got, again, these arrows flashing, telling you that there's fresh air coming in and warm air going out. It's showing you that the fan is working. And then the only other thing to know about these is to turn them off, you just hold the power button again. It switches into the off setting. And these things need to go through a cool down cycle. So right, it's really hot right now. There's a lot of plastic and some microchips and things inside. You never want to just unplug these things to turn them off. You want to let it go through its cool-down cycle. So the fan is still running as it's cooling itself down, and it'll do that for a fair bit of time before it finally clicks off. So I think there's more to this. I believe you can set timers so that it can automatically turn on and off, but I haven't played with that at all. I'm sure someone else has made a more detailed video about how to use the controls, but those are the basic controls that you need to know if you've never ever seen or used one of these before, and that'll at least get you started. And then really quick, mine came with a remote. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You can hold down the off and on buttons to turn it off and on, and the little plus and minus are how you can adjust the heat from across the room. All right, so there it is. There's my diesel heater install in this 1970s era cabin. It's sold as an 8 kilowatt unit, but I'm pretty sure this is actually a 5 kilowatt unit, and that's just false advertising. And yeah, this thing is easily warming this place up, and I'm really happy with this solution. So there you go. That's how I installed a diesel heater into this 50-year-old trailer. I have slept in here as low as into the minus 20s Celsius, and I was comfortable. I wasn't going to die, let's put it that way. Yeah, it works great. It doesn't throw out a lot of moisture. It wasn't that hard to install, but you do need a fair amount of technical proficiency. So yeah, if this video helped you, let me know down in the comments. Consider subscribing to the channel, liking and sharing, and all of that great stuff. And I will catch you guys in the next video.